We have to go to our wait what.
All right, do you want to go first? I wouldn't be surprised if we had the same one, quite frankly.
And this is wait what. It doesn't mean that I didn't think it was effective or not, but my main one is the liquid IV one.
Yes.
Yeah, with Phil Collins. The Phil Collins, Take a Look at Me Now. I mean, I guess that was a pretty good, interesting thing. Now, I will say this. Will I take a look? Maybe I will. Chat with DP and McGee, the podcast that takes an often irreverent, sometimes cynical, and on occasion even a serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, David Parro.
And I'm Tim McGee.
Somehow we made it through. Tim and the Super Bowl and the opening of winter games occurring on the same weekend. That's a first, by the way. I found that out. I found that pretty interesting. Of course, along with a not-so-thin political veil surrounding both events, but there is no rest for the sports biz, especially in February. This weekend we have the Daytona 500 in Florida, an NBA All-Star weekend from LA. But Tim, over to you. What is on your mind?
I really am torn between starting with the Olympics and starting with the Super Bowl. So let's bridge the gap and let's talk about how politics have inserted themselves into both events. Let's start off by saying that the alternative Super Bowl programming at halftime, I wouldn't call it a halftime show, but the alternative program, it drew a big audience. I heard over 6 million people watched it. What I find particularly humorous, though, is among those not watching it were the people in Mar-a-Lago, including the president. There were photos that came out that showed guests at Mar-a-Lago watching the Bad Bunny performance. It was interesting that, a big part of the reason they created this alternative programming was because the president came out criticizing Bad Bunny, and meanwhile he and all his guests watched it. And then the Olympics, these young men and women who have worked so hard to get to where they are put in an untenable situation where they're asked questions by the media. And I don't think anybody said they hate America. Nobody was saying bad things about this country. They simply said they didn't agree with some of the things that were going on in this country. And they were attacked by many people on the right, from the president on down. And I find that very unfortunate. I don't find many things more American than the ability to speak your mind, even if it's critical of the government or the party in power or the people in the White House or whatever it happens to be. So I find it very unfortunate. And of course, in this age of social media, it goes so far as to people getting death threats, which is just, it makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, I think there's, anytime an American says has gone on foreign soil and been critical, there's a chance they're going to face a backlash, certainly. But yeah, this has gotten a little out of hand, and we're at a time when this idea of criticizing policy, criticizing approach, is viewed as anti-American or hating America. And that, it's going to take some time, I think, to get back to some semblance of what that should mean, but hopefully that will happen. What Hunter Hess, in particular, the freestyle skier, who was asked, and he didn't say anything that, out of the ordinary, didn't say anything all that bad, but he said he's got conflicted thoughts on this, and he got attacked very brutally by the president. I think Michaela Schifrin got criticized heavily, not quite as brutally as Hunter Hess did, simply by quoting Nelson Mandela and, speaking about her own thoughts. I will say this: it doesn't seem like USOC leadership has come down on athletes, or tried to keep that under control, just to keep things a little calm. But yeah, it's been tough to watch that. I think particularly for these athletes that just have worked so hard all their lives to get to this point.
Yeah, I think 𝘋𝘳𝗃𝗀𝗀 deserves a lot of credit for how she's come sort of out of the box in her first games. I think she's done a tremendous job. But let's keep in mind that politics is not new to the Olympic Games. They insert themselves at different times in different ways. Going back to 1936, Hitler thought the Berlin Games would be a showcase for his Uber race, his Aryan nation. That was quickly scrambled by the performance of most notably Jesse Owens, but his relay teammate, Jewish American Marty Glickman, who went on to have a great career as a sportscaster here in the New York area. You had 1968 Mexico City games where Tommie Smith and John Carlos gave the Black Power salute on the podium. You obviously had the 1972 games where the Black September terrorist group took the Israelis hostages, and so horrifically all of those athletes and coaches were killed. You had the boycott in 1980 by U.S. You had the boycott by the USSR in 1984 in retaliation. I mean, politics has been part of the Olympic Games. So anybody who says that the Olympic Games are not political is being disingenuous or uninformed.
Correct. The Tommie Smith and John Carlos thing, that was, I'm old enough to remember that happening. And that was an unbelievable moment, and it shocked this country. And they caught all kinds of heat. They lost their medals. They were given them back finally, and have, I think, since been honored. There's certainly a feature on that happening, that occurrence, at the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. I think it's still there.
Looking back, looking back at that moment, and I don't remember it, was incredibly brave by those two athletes. But you have to put it in context, right? This was 1968, the fall of 1968, coming on the heels of the assassination of RFK, MLK, riots in the streets of a lot of American cities, Detroit, Cleveland, Newark, and others, Watts, section of LA. What they did was, in hindsight, incredibly brave and incredibly non-threatening, right? Simply showing that Black Power symbol, the raised fist, but wearing that black glove, just incredibly powerful moment.
Right. I think that, and I don't even want to compare that with what we just talked about with 𝗋𝘳𝗪𝗓 or Hunter Hess, because they were answering a question basically, and they chose a certain way to answer the question. Obviously, Smith and Carlos planned this out, and it was a statement. And here's the thing about protest. Here's the way I look at protest. It's meant to make someone feel uncomfortable. And people use the platform they have, and we all do it in a certain way in our lives. You use the leverage and the power you have. These guys were on the medal stand, and they took that moment to make a statement about something, and they knew it was going to. They had to know it was going to cause this massive backlash, and it did. And
they still did it.
Yes, and they still did it. So I don't even consider what is happening now protest. It's just people answering a question and giving a view. They probably would have chosen not to answer those questions if they didn't have it. But there's no doubt that there is, particularly in Europe, there are going to be views of America right now. And we saw it in the opening ceremonies. And by the way, I do want to, before I forget, I thought 𝘃𝘀 𝗃𝘃𝑐oventry's opening was a great public, first time out opening for her. I think she nailed her speech, and I was looking back over the speech, and this "let these games be a celebration of what unites us and of everything that makes us human," which I think is even more important in this AI age that we're living through. So I loved her opening comments about that. But
I just think, I think she has, Terrence Burns, past guest, posted something about her on LinkedIn, and I said, she's not going to be perfect, but boy, she's been good so far. On a much lighter, hopefully much lighter note, Bad Bunny.
So I guess lighter, because it was very light, uplifting performance. And going back to the whole alternate programming featuring Kid Rock and some other performers, it was one of the most hyped shows you'd ever seen. So it did do a pretty good number. And there were people so committed to not watching or not celebrating Bad Bunny. Arguably, I'll say this because I'm not looking at the stats, largest recording artist in the world right now, most downloaded, et cetera.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what the NFL is going for, appealing to a broad global base as that league goes. It's the most ultimately capitalistic thing you could even think of, having him there. And it was, I didn't understand a thing he said, but the vibe was unbelievable. And the production value, and he nailed it. And so did everybody else. So did Ricky Martin, and so did Lady Gaga. It was We were all very highly entertained, the group I was watching with.
We could do a whole show on this. I thought it was wonderful. I didn't understand the word. It reminded me of a 1950s musical shot in Technicolor because of the color, the dancing, the music. It was even if you don't speak Spanish, it was very clear that he was talking about the Puerto Rican experience, or he was performing about the Puerto Rican experience and paying tribute to the Puerto Rican culture. Very little political content, if any. His strongest political statement was the only thing more powerful than hate is love. If you take exception to that message, I don't know what to say to you. So I'll say two other things and then I'll shut up. One is I have a good friend who, like you, has been a lifelong musician. And he said, when I don't understand the language in which something's being sung, I simply treat the voice as another instrument and enjoy the melody. And I thought that was wonderful. And then somebody who's been mentioned on this show before, 𝘚𝘶𝘳𝘷𝘪𝘷𝘦, my friend 𝘚𝘶, said, when Sir Paul McCartney performs in China, do the Chinese expect him to sing in Cantonese? Right? So why would you expect Bad Bunny to sing in English when his entire career has been, singing in Spanish, his first language?
There's so many things I want to segue to right now. I mean, it was interesting that Bocelli sang at the end. Just this beautiful voice, and he seems to get better. He sang in Italian, and it was beautiful. It doesn't matter. It's just the moving, that you experience when you hear gifts like this. And Bad Bunny's performance was as much about dance and choreography as it was about anything else, and that's always been the vibe of his music. But now that you brought up 𝘚𝘶, and when you first said that maybe going to a lighter moment, I thought you were going to talk about is it a controversy or is it not a controversy, Penisgate going on as a follow-up to the original scandal we spoke about with the enhanced spatialness, I think we called it, during an episode recently with 𝘋𝘳𝘪𝘷𝘦 𝘃𝘃. And that there was a story coming out of a German newspaper, Bild, which is just funny that that's named Bild, where athletes may have been injecting their penises with hyaluronic acid to enhance them, which would then allow them to have more space added to their suit. That's the idea. But no one's been able to prove it. The WADA chief is basically saying, I don't really buy it. He's kind of chuckling it off, and there have been no accounts of this. But it's where we are. I mean, a story can get started as a joke, and who knows where it's going to go. But I thought that now that you mentioned 𝘚𝘶, I had to bring that up. But we won't go into why 𝘚𝘶 is negative. We don't need to do that again.
I call it Derek Small's Gate. Right, if you remember from Spinal Tap when he goes through security and he's got a cucumber wrapped in aluminum foil,
and he just finally goes.
Yeah,
that's such a great scene. Oh man!
Boo to NBC for, and no pun intended, for muting the boos throughout the stadium when J.D. Vance was shown.
Well, I watched the actual original, and I don't think they were ready for it because the announcer did say, "Oh, those are boos." I think what a lot of people tried to interpret that as when the U.S. delegation came in, they were booed, and they weren't. They weren't, because there's so many Americans that are in that audience there, and they got cheered. I thought it was a great cheer when they came in, and then they did flash to J.D. Vance and his wife in the box, and there were boos. And I've heard they're denying that they covered that up in the when they reran it, but I'm pretty sure that they did. And yes, probably boo that they did it, but it is an American broadcast. They went to that shot. I don't think they should have gone to that shot. But the stadium went to the shot, the production in there, and you knew he was going to get...
He knew he was going to get booed if he showed up there. And in the scheme of things, it's so,
I mean, I'm not saying one thing or another, but probably a pretty tough gig because someone's got to go to that. And I think Marco was over there originally, but he didn't show up at that thing. So yeah, all the boos could be directed at one guy.
Marco Rubio was probably, no, I'll get the bill. Let me settle up. I'll meet you there.
He was sinking onto another couch at that point.
Well, don't mention J.D. Vance. No, yeah. Let's not even go there. Oh, this is a family-friendly podcast.
Okay.
Want to talk about ads for a few minutes? I got the text from you during the game, you know, asking me to keep look for some weight watt ads. So
Well, yeah, I don't know. I see. I'm always thinking about the podcast, Tim. What can I say? I mean,
yeah,
I'm going to say this before I give any ad thoughts that I had on this, good, bad, or otherwise. I was the curator, I was the director, I was the handler, I was the organizer of a Super Bowl advertising bingo contest. So I honestly wasn't able to pay attention as much because I was concentrating. I went back and later, looked at most of them. But listen, you can't deny, I thought in terms of a big hit, I thought the AB Clydesdale with Freebird.
yeah, and not because I grew up on Long Island and everybody who was on Long Island was issued certain albums, like One More from the Road from Skinner and Outlaw's first album and Charlie Daniels Band. AB just seems to hit it out of the park every year across every brand. It doesn't matter if it's this sort of inspirational, emotional, patriotic thing with the Eagle and the Clydesdale. It doesn't matter if it's the What's Up. It doesn't matter if it's 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝘀 𝗘𝗽𝗶𝘀.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And one of my favorite ads was the Michelob Ultra spot with Kurt
I knew
Russell.
you
They
were going to
just,
like that. I was going to guess that you liked that. I thought that was pretty good too. Yeah.
but that was, but AB just seems that they don't miss.
You could say that because they've done these Clydesdale things forever, and they somehow find a new way to extract that emotion. And the way they closed it with humor, with the "Are you crying?" is "No, the sun's in my eye." I thought that was brilliant. But yeah, just fabulous execution, no doubt.
Yeah, I think, you hear the expression "mom, baseball, apple pie, and Chevrolet." I think you've got to add AB into that, even though it's not owned by an American company anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's as American as it gets. And that Kurt Russell ad with the subtle sort of homage to Miracle. Again.
He just delivered it exactly the same way. There were a lot of AI ads as you expected that there would be. There were two that I thought were okay. I actually thought OpenAI's was pretty good because they kept the human aspect in it and the striving for something that we use AI. I thought the Anthropic one for their Claude AI was decent as well, but because it was taking a shot at OpenAI for starting to do advertisements, and that was smart. But I'm going to give one of my top misses, which I thought the GenSpark Matthew Broderick ad, where they basically are like, "Hey, use AI, take a day off." That literally was their line was, "Let GenSpark automate your work and take a day off." I'm like, that's what AI. Maybe for managers, it's like, hey, we can just have AI do all this, and we don't have to have all these employees. It just seemed like make you feel even worse about what AI is leading to. So I thought that was a huge miss.
I thought the State Farm Living on a Prayer sort of missed. And they've done some great spots in the past with Aaron Rodgers, with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I thought that was a miss.
And I love Danny McBride and Michael Key.
Yeah.
And I agree. Just they tried way too hard.
Yeah. But my Weight Watt ad, you want to hear that now, or you want to?
No.
Well, let me tell you a couple of other ones that I really liked. One was the Dove spot. I thought was great. It's interesting that still is something we have to worry about. Girls who drop out of sports because of body image issues. Hopefully that will go away, right? Because, it's more about your health than your body shape. I mean, you look now at a young woman who's just tearing it up in women's college basketball, Audi Crooks at Iowa State. She doesn't have the archetypical basketball player's body, but she's an unbelievable player, and I'm hoping that little girls look up to her, and who may look more like her than Cameron Brink, for example. And this is not a knock on Cameron Brink, but they may look at it and go, "I can do that. I can play basketball. I'm not tall and lean, right? But I can play basketball because Audi Crooks can play basketball."
Yeah, I've liked what they've been doing for a while with this campaign, and I'm maybe biased as a two-time girl dad, but I love that spot. Loved it.
Yeah, I also love the Redfin and Rocket spot. Won't
Nice.
You be my neighbor?
Yeah.
I thought that was really
one
good.
that was similar to that I liked was Google's smart, in my opinion, because they actually suggest something about the utility of their product that they're trying to promote. and the adding of Gemini to Google search, and the ad was called Google New Home, where a single mom, I think with her son, is going into a new place, and they're able to envision what the home might look like. It was similar to the Won't You Be My Neighbor, which I could agree was nice.
I didn't like the Duncan spot. I thought it was too hokey. Using AI. Okay, so now we know what Sam Malone looked like back. First of all, the show was over by the 90s. To me, the only Duncan ad featuring an Affleck that counts is Casey Affleck's ad.
That was one of the best SNL shorts ever.
You can't smoke it. I'm not smoking in here. Yes, you are. Tell me you like the vanilla nut tap.
Casey Affleck wins an Academy Award for Manchester by the Sea. Unbelievable performance in one of the most brutal movies of all time. But that's secondary to his performance in that Dunkin' Donuts SNL spoof ad.
Donuts. Foreman brother to Scott Conn in the Ocean's movies. Those are his top two. The one with what's her name? Heath Ledger's Michelle Williams.
Yeah, that's Manchester by the Sea, right? Yeah.
But I didn't particularly and I think you and I are in the minority on that ad. Quite frankly, a lot of people loved it.
Well, it had so much star power in it, and Brady's entry in the end, and it had all that pop culture stuff, and you knew it was coming. I think. Almost similar to the State Farm one. I think when they just overdo it with celebrities and layer it all in. But, so I don't tend to like that style of advertising. I'll be the first to admit it. We have to go to our Wait What.
All right. Do you want to go first? I wouldn't be surprised if we had the same one, quite frankly.
And this is Wait What. It doesn't mean that I didn't think it was effective or not. But my main one is the Liquid IV one.
Yes.
Yeah, with Phil Collins. Now, the Phil Collins, Take a Look at Me Now. I mean, I guess that was a pretty good, interesting thing. Now, I will say this. Will I take a look? Maybe I will. I don't know. But the fact is that you see that many toilets.
I didn't know where it was going, and then the line was "Look at your pee."
Yes.
I will, as somebody who suffers. This is probably TMI for this audience, but as somebody who suffers from kidney stones, that is something that's never far from my mind. Being properly hydrated,
but it definitely deserved a wait. What? There was just singing urinals, toilets, receptacles of one kind or another. The only other one that approached, because I just thought it was like the Coinbase trying to be clever again, like they did when they did the QR code ad several years ago. But I think those are good picks, Tim. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our guest. We're very excited about.
It's time for our guest.
So as we've branched out on this podcast to include more of the entertainment side of the business, one series that has been mentioned perhaps more than any other has been Netflix's Drive to Survive, which documents the Formula One season as it moves all around the world. With Season 8 of Drive to Survive set to drop on February 27th, we thought it was high time we brought someone in to discuss its impact. Piers Sanderson is an Emmy-winning director, writer, and producer whose career has moved from underground club culture to the top tier of global television. A former nightclub promoter and bar owner and restaurant owner during the 90s, he later reinvented himself as a filmmaker, went on to direct 5 seasons of Drive to Survive, one of the most watched documentary series in the world. And if I could, on a more personal note, he's a wonderful guy, and I think he has one of the coolest cap collections I've ever seen. Not just the one that he's wearing right now, Tim, but an unbelievable collection of team logoed things. But every time I asked him about it, like what's the reference there? And he's like, I don't know. It just looks great. And you got to respect that. So anyway, Piers,
you don't need a better reason than that.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
All right. So let's go ahead and jump right in. As I mentioned, Drive to Survive Season 8 drops February 27th. Can you give us any sort of overview of what fans might expect in this upcoming season, maybe different from what they've seen before?
Different from what they've seen before, the most obvious thing is the McLaren story this year, the story of the winning team and the winning drivers. We had, in my time, and I'm guessing even in the 4 seasons before I did it, 3 seasons before I joined, unparalleled access to that story. because when we started off, Lewis was winning everything in the first year. There wasn't even access to Mercedes. Then from my first season onwards, that was when Red Bull won, and Max Verstappen makes no secret of his of the distance he keeps from us. He doesn't let us in. So we've been telling these stories without huge access to the winning drivers. And this year we had an incredible battle at the top, but McLaren let us in because Zach Brown, he's a marketing guy. He understands. Yeah. He understands.
Zach wanting the camera around. What?
Yeah, exactly. But he gets the benefit of it, and it's allowed us to tell the story in a I'm not going to say necessarily better way, but just more doors were open than previously.
Drive to Survive has received considerable credit for driving, no pun intended, interest here in the United States in F1, and rightfully so. Why do you think it's been so effective in converting people who are viewers of the series who may not have watched F1 previously and turn them into true fans of the actual sport?
I love this question, Tim, because it comes at it, or we've come at it in a completely backwards way. Normally, people come to a sport, they love a sport, they engage with the sport, and as a result, they want to know more about it, more about the people behind that sport. For us, it's always about the human stories. That has always come first from the beginning. From the directors they recruited, they didn't recruit sports directors. They recruited directors from human documentaries, human storytelling, and that's the first thing that we always do. And the sport has always been second. And if we could match up a human story with something that happens on track, then that was amazing. But for us, it was always about the human story. So our audience fell in love with the people in the sport, and as a result, wanted to know more about the sport, which it's completely backwards to what's always happened before.
Before I let David ask his next question, we have a tradition on this show. Usually somebody will say, great question. You said, I love this question.
In a classic British way, did it even like more classily.
And so the tradition is the person who didn't write the question has to give credit to the person who did write the question. So I have to give credit to David for that question. I believe this is the first one of the new season, David. So,
I think so.
And David won quite
I think people are on to us.
Year.
They don't say it that much anymore. I think they're on to us.
Well, that presumes that people listen.
I did see David smile when I started to answer that question.
Yeah.
So. I know he was patting.
I knew that. He
patted himself on the back.
It's just always. I go into every new year, Piers, with that as one of my goals. All right, there are several other box-to-box productions. Of course, Box-to-Box Productions is this wonderful production company that produces Drive to Survive, as well as some other shows that have made it onto Netflix. Breakpoint, which covered professional tennis, and Full Swing, a partnership with the PGA Tour. They haven't fared as well as Drive to Survive, and I don't think they've had the same type of impact. Breakpoint lasted only 2 seasons. Why has Drive to Survive succeeded over time and just had its almost cultural impact, whereas those others haven't broken through? Do you have a sense of why that is?
I think it's lots of reasons. There's not just one secret sauce ingredient. There are lots of ingredients that have made it the success it is. We have 23, 24 races a year. I mean, now it's 24, but initially it was 22, 23 in really glamorous locations. So you get to go around the world in these really kind of amazing places. And we follow the sun. So the sun is usually always shining in these places as well. You've got these movie star looking drivers who are doing that archetypally glamorous thing of, looking gorgeous and getting in a fast car. I mean, it's not even a fast car, it's a rocket. And they're going at these incredible speeds, risking their lives for the sport and for the spectacle. You have got politics and backstabbing and, all of this skullduggery that goes on. And, and people are fascinated by that. And that really brings something as well. But I think, and all of these people might say, oh, well, in golf, they're going off to glamorous locations, or, there is elements as well of good-looking sports stars driving amazing cars. Another element actually is you have the same 20 people every competition fighting each other. That's a big difference as well. So I did the Rugby Six Nations series, which was very difficult when you're trying to talk about a team of 15 people playing another team of 15 people, and then you don't see them again through the series. So having the same 20 people coming back week after week really helps. Having your teammate being your closest rival really helps as well. I mean, that doesn't happen in other sports, but the person you want to beat most and the person it hurts the most to be beaten by is your teammates. That brings another dynamic. I think all of these things helped or are part of it, but I think the thing that made it endure is initially, and we've managed to do this pretty much all the way through, we've had really strong characters who either deliberately let us in to show them in their weakest, most vulnerable moments, or we filmed them in their weakest and most vulnerable moments and persuaded them to let us keep it in, or Netflix decided they were just going to keep it in no matter what at the end. And I think that's probably the biggest ingredient, that you see these very successful, powerful, wealthy people in facing horrendous choices or moments in their career, and we've told those stories, and that's made it very relatable, and it's made the audiences love them.
I want to follow up a little bit on that, if you don't mind. What are some of the keys to getting to these people at the most vulnerable times, at their highest highs, maybe their lowest lows, and to be able to give that intimate portrait to viewers? What are some of the keys in filmmaking to be able to do that?
So trust is a big part of it. It takes a while to build up the trust. When a driver is having terrible race after terrible race in a car that should be doing better, and the minute that they finish and they take their helmet off, you're putting a camera in their face, they've got to trust you and allow you to stay there. And that's difficult. You know, we do that. It's the brands, the teams, which are obviously all brands. They're all selling something pretty much. They realize the benefit of letting us tell their stories. So they've got us in somehow, or persuaded people to be in. And if you look at all of our stories, they 99% of our stories end with a happy ending. We find a way of giving some payoff at the end. So we don't just make it about how terrible somebody's done and leave it there, because that's not good storytelling. Traditional storytelling is the prince against the dragon. If the prince kills the dragon straight away or is killed by the dragon straight away, there's no story there. You want to see the fight, and at the end he wins. And I think they've seen, we tell them, look, everything's terrible at the moment, but at some point you're going to come out of this and you're going to have a great story to tell. But we need to be able to tell the bad bit to be able to tell the good bit.
We're going to dive in a little more on storytelling in a second, but I'm curious. There like several people have become pretty big global celebrities from this series. Gunther Steiner, who you obviously worked with very closely, I work very closely with, Christian Horner, Daniel Ricciardo. These guys became big stars. All three of them currently not engaged in the sport, but they became big stars. Why are some people just suited for that type of stardom?
Because they let us film in the terrible moments when they were vulnerable, or when they did something wrong, or they were having a terrible time. They still let the cameras roll, and the audiences fell in love with them because of that. And they all had different motives for doing that. Gunther, he's completely unfiltered. He is how he is. He'd put a radio mic on for me. I'd have it on him all day. He wouldn't ask to take it off, and I was capturing these moments where the team was in meltdown, and that's why you get these classic lines that have come from him, because that's what he was saying at the time. And it was not about the camera. It was just, that was him. And he never watched the series. So the next year he'd let me put the mic on him again, and he wasn't censoring himself. Danny Rick, again, completely open. And although it was difficult at the end with McLaren to keep filming him when he was having such a terrible time, he still let us in enough to be able to tell that story. We saw him in having just a complete terrible time at McLaren. Christian Horner was very different. He understood the benefit of having the camera in there, and also because we weren't getting it with Max, his job was to sell Red Bull, his cans of fizzy drink. So he knew that that by doing that, and also he sold the brand Horner quite well, I think. So he would let us in, and he would use us in a like, if he saw me coming down the paddock and he'd just won and he was having this public beef with Toto Wolff, and like he caught me at the corner of his eye, as I came alongside him with the camera, he would give me that line. He wouldn't look at the camera, he'd be talking to Jerry, but he knew what he was doing. But also the flip side of that is, when he had his own scandal and everything was going wrong for him, he still allowed us in there and to tell the story. So I think all those three, they weren't protected by the gatekeepers. They let us in, and audiences love that. The audiences don't want to watch somebody just winning and having a great time all the time. They want to see them overcome these difficult moments.
So, as David alluded to, I want to ask you, how do you come up with the storylines for the show? Do you work backwards from that happy ending? I can't imagine you can, because you don't know what the happy ending is going to be while you're filming. But how do you come up with the storylines?
So you can identify at the beginning of the season what potential storylines might be. Like last season, we had all these new rookies. You knew that's going to bring something. You know, you had people changing teams. You know that's going to bring something. So you can identify sports stories, if you like. But what happens, we just wait for the stories to happen in front of us. And then as soon as they happen, we follow them and push them. And then sometimes have to wait to the very end of the season before we get that positive payoff. And I'll give you an example in this last series. Three races in, Liam Lawson lost his seat at Red Bull. And we were all over that, because, here's a guy, he's been working all of his life to get this top seat. He lasts 3 races and Christian says, you're no good. He wasn't given enough time. He believed he wasn't given enough time, and he was kicked out. So we had all of this really strong emotional stuff at the beginning. By the end of the season, he's beating Yuki Tsunoda in what's supposed to be a slower car, and he keeps his seat and Yuki's out. So, you have these stories that you've got the beginning of and the middle of, but you're just waiting for that end.
I can attest to that. In the season, and it was I guess the 2023 season, and you and I worked together putting together a day. We were in Dallas. We went to corporate headquarters of MoneyGram. You came to the education program we did, where Gunther and Kevin and Nico were there, along with our CMO. And you were with us for a full day. And the storyline I think that you were potentially working on was that the team turns itself around, gets this new corporate backer. They had a big change, upgrade coming to the Austin race, the U.S. Grand Prix, and nothing turned around. The season did not turn around, yet you also were capturing a lot of Gunther during the season, doing a lot of thinking about his future. And I remember the last shot, and it was shot, I believe, in Abu Dhabi, of him drinking a coffee at the doorway, kind of looking out, and it was brilliant. And because what we found out not long after the season is that Gene Haas was going to sack Gunther as the team principal, and then that became the story. And I do remember you telling me once, you said, the storyline's just not what we were looking at. So I assume that you always had you developed multiple potentials as the season kind of went on, and there were different threads that went. But that was a good example. And that's how important Drive to Survive was. We were thinking about it in meetings, like, what are we going to get to pick up here? Are we going to get to pick up there? Last season, episode 9, the one on the team, I did get a good hug shot with Ayao in it, which I'm sure you shot, by the way. So thank you for that. Because that helped my reputation huge.
The good thing about the series was Netflix put so much money into it. I've never worked in such huge budgets, and it meant that we could go and spend tens of thousands of pounds at a race weekend on flights, accommodation, everybody's wages. Everybody was there, everything that it takes to be there filming for 4 days and not use a second of it. There was no pressure to use that material, because if you got it, we didn't have to make the budget work. Anything that we wanted to do, if you had a crazy idea, or we want to film plane to plane or whatever, it's like, sure, let's do it. That just never happens, and it's not going to happen again. It was all part of the second golden age of television, where the streamers were throwing so much money in. But the other side of that meant you'd have to turn around to people who are giving huge amounts of their time, moving mountains to get you in there, and you having to be having those brutally honest conversations, meaning saying, I have to warn you, we might not use any of this, and that they were difficult, but I found it was much better to say that before than when the season dropped and in March you're in Bahrain and you're having to face people and they're saying, what happened? So
that's what all of Tim's clients say to him when he's doing some, any consulting work. Just go out, spend whatever you need. We know you'll pull off some magic.
You think my clients were spending money out of their own pocket? They're so cheap sometimes.
Wait, I guess you think that your clients aren't listening to this podcast.
I didn't say which clients. It
Okay, good point. Good point.
It's past clients.
We talked on the opening and the introduction about you making a pretty massive career pivot. So we're going a little off Drive to Survive here, but what was the impetus for that?
So in my 20s, or in my teens and 20s, when electronic music came out of your wonderful country, out of Detroit and Chicago, and came across to the UK, I was right there as it happened, and it just took over my life. I'd been into music as a kid, but when this came, I just thought I have to make this into a career somehow. So I did that for my 20s, and then I had record shops, record labels, those kind of things, and started running nightclubs, and through doing hospitality, moved into bars and restaurants. And I get bored very quickly if I'm not being creative. So opening a bar or restaurant was great, but running it day to day I just didn't have the patience for it. So when I realized I can't just open a new bar or restaurant every couple of months, and I started thinking about a new career. And I had seen the democratization of digital music, how it meant that people no longer needed a record deal to be able to make a record. They could make it in their bedroom. And I saw in the early 2000s, Apple brought out a piece of software called Final Cut Pro, and you could cut video on your computer. And I thought, I wonder if the same thing's going to happen with film as happened with music, because to be a director before that point, you had to go to the BBC, somebody had to know you, you had to get in, you had to be an intern. Nobody in my family knew anything like that. So I took a punt. I thought, I wonder if the same thing will happen with filmmaking. And at that time, there was no YouTube, so I couldn't work out where the audience was going to come from, but I could see the technology was there. So I sold up and jumped into filmmaking. And then, 25 years later, still here.
Wow.
Yeah.
You saw something that very few others saw. That's truly visionary. For fans of your work, what can they look forward to? What's coming down the pike?
We're at a really interesting, exciting time at the moment in storytelling, because the television model is pretty broken. The people aren't spending money on the advertising anymore. A lot of people are watching Instagram, they're watching TikTok, things that didn't cost any money to be made. And that's taking eyes away from the TV model. So the TV industry is in crisis. But brands are understanding that the value of long form storytelling. And a classic example of this, a really good example of this, is, I don't know if you saw the kimi film on
the WhatsApp driven one. The
WhatsApp drove. Yeah. And that's the way things are moving. If you can bring value to a brand, you can still do these fantastic long form stories. And it's working out who you can bring value to, so that you can still what you want to do and still do what you want to do, which is tell stories, and the brand gets what they want. And that's where we are at the moment. And that's an exciting transition that I'm embracing post half a decade of Drive to Survive.
I'm sure it will go well. Yeah, that Kimi Antonelli, what do they call it? The call or the choice maybe? I shouldn't remember the name, but I do remember the WhatsApp connection, because the whole thing was driven by everything going through WhatsApp, both text and phone. It was an impressive brand integration there. Yeah. Okay, we're close to moving to our closing questions, but before we do that, I did want to get your thought on F1 the movie, which came out, the Jerry Bruckheimer film. In addition to you guys always being at races, obviously that film crew was there. I was a little surprised that it got nominated in the Best Picture category for the Academy Awards this year. Just wanted to get your thoughts as a filmmaker yourself on the film, and whether you think it deserved to be elevated into that category.
I think anybody who's really close to the sport will struggle with a little bit of the film, just because they can just the same way that people struggle with Drive to Survive, who've been massively Formula One fans for 50 years, and they say, oh, that didn't happen, and that's dramatic storytelling. So there's little bits of it that you think, okay, it's not actually quite like that. But I watched that film with my 15-year-old son, and we thought it was fantastic. We had a great night watching that. The entertainment was great, and the people who brought in Drive to Survive and then have brought in Formula One, the movie, to help drive Formula One are just incredible visionaries. I mean, if you were thinking, what is it we can do to follow Drive to Survive? Well, let's do a film with Brad Pitt. I mean, it's brilliant. So it's great. It's great for the sport. I'm probably in your camp, David. I'm not sure it's an Academy Award contender, or should be, for Best Picture. It feels much more family entertainment,
and it was all that and some on that regard.
Yeah.
It was very, very entertaining, I thought. Okay, normally we ask all our guests, how'd you get your start in normally the sports business, or in your case maybe filmmaking? I think we covered that in the one question, so I am going to skip to our final question for you, Piers, which is, if you had to give one piece of advice to someone looking into breaking into producing or directing, writing content, what would that be?
I would say don't ask permission. Don't wait for someone to tell you can do it. Just go and do it. Find a way to do it. And that's never been more possible now than it has been historically. There are so many ways that you can get your work out there in front of an audience, so there's no excuse not to, if that's what you want to do.
That's great. You nailed that one. Love it. That'll be an easy edit on the Sportsbiz break-in, I think. Because he just crushed it.
Yeah.
It'll be one that'll work well with my lack of editing skills. But Piers, thank you. You gave us some unbelievable insight into a show that obviously I watch and millions of others do around the world, because it has been a very impactful show, and you've been a real key part of that. So I'm happy that I got to know you during my time at MoneyGram, and certainly with all that you have done actually for the sport, not only with MoneyGram Haas F1 team, or at least the previous name of it, but for the sport overall. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, especially post Super Bowl. I'm surprised you found space for me with such a huge sporting weekend to talk about afterwards.
Well, we have to move on. I mean, February is a huge sports biz in the States. We have Winter Games going on. We just had Super Bowl, Daytona 500, NBA All-Star Weekend is this coming weekend. Obviously, testing in Bahrain is coming up as well. So there's all kinds of stuff going on here. So it never slows down. We got to keep things moving. We certainly did talk about the Super Bowl advertising before you joined us. Did you watch the game, by the way?
I didn't watch the game, no.
Right.
Did you watch the Cadillac advert? Did you see that pop up?
Yeah,
I did. Yes,
I wanted to. Yeah, we were going to talk. I was going to talk about that in the close, because Michael Bay is suing Cadillac for 1.5 million US, because he claims they stole his idea. They made a verbal commitment for him to direct the spot, and then they went in another direction.
I was reading about that. I was just thinking where Formula One has come to, for it to, like, it was like 100 million people watching that or something, and is it probably, I don't know, but to have Formula One in front of that huge sports audience is just fantastic.
It was an interesting play for the other American team, which I think will end up becoming known as the American team. And they also placed the car in Times Square, which I'm a little bummed, because I was in Florida. I just got back last night from Florida, and yesterday was the last day that it was going to be there. I wanted to get down and take a peek at it, but they put it right in Times Square and displayed it, unveiled it as the ad was running, apparently. So pretty cool.
It just gets bigger and bigger, doesn't it?
Yeah. All right, sir. We'll talk soon,
right.
okay?
Nice to meet you. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, Tim. Bye.
To director Piers Sanderson. for coming on the show. David, I sometimes feel like I have a creative bent, and then I meet somebody like him, and I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah, we all have creativity, shows up differently, but his is at a high level.
Yeah. So now's the time in the show where we give shout outs. We take a look forward. What's on your mind?
Maybe we're doing this too much these days, but one of my heroes, marketing heroes, business leader heroes, passed away last week, Paul 𝘧𝗧𝗏 at 91. Paul 𝘧𝗧𝗏 was the legendary chief marketing officer at McDonald's Corporation. I had the pleasure to be able to work with him. And he was just one of these guys that had it right. Speaking of creativity, he believed and loved great creative. He had a set of standards that McDonald's, as a brand leader, as the number one in the category, had to follow, and he followed those aggressively and made sure that everybody else did. And he will be very missed, but his legacy is huge. One quick story: Bill Elliott was our NASCAR driver, and Bill was having a series of tire problems, it seemed, every race, and we'd always put out the PR thing after each race to, tell the corporate leadership how things were going. And Paul walks into my office one day with a 20 and throws it on my desk and says, "Tell Elliot to buy a new set of tires." And it was just kind of the way that he showed he was involved, but it was always, kind of fun. And he definitely believed in sponsorship and making sure that McDonald's was covered well. He would, if he saw things that he didn't think that logo that he was behind creating was not showing up in the way that he believed, he'd make sure he let you know, but always in a way that he was right. Let's put it that way. He usually wasn't wrong about those things. Anyway, Tim, one of those guys that you're just lucky that you even had a chance to be around. So
it's a very nice tribute.
As far as what I'm watching, I am interested in catching as much of everything around the Daytona 500, particularly given all of the drama, I guess, at the end of the year. This is a big new year with, kind of with the changing focus of the sport. And we will see how that goes. F1 testing starts in Bahrain this weekend in advance of the season. And of course, in advance of Drive to Survive coming out. And I do think that it is going to be interesting to follow this Cadillac F1 story with the lawsuit from Michael Bay, who is the director of Armageddon and Pearl Harbor, some of these great movies like that.
Transformers.
Yeah, correct. He was brought in by Dan Tauris, who's the CEO of the team, and TWG Global, which is the company that pretty much owns the team with GM Investment. And the ad was interesting. It used the John Kennedy voiceover from Going to the Moon, maybe a little dramatic, given comparing to an F1 entry, but
Michael Bay is not known as
right.
a subtle filmmaker.
There's nothing subtle about Michael Bay. So apparently, he says that the team and Tauris stole the idea after a discussion with him. Tauris put out a statement saying that was an exploratory meeting. We already had the idea baked. We just wanted you to bring it to life in the way that Michael Bay can. And Bay is saying that it was his idea. Now, 1.5 million
seems
for
really
that
low.
Seemed low to me, but maybe we're just so jaded by the like every lawsuit seems to be 10 billion.
Well, it seemed low to me, but it did mention plus damages. I don't know what damages you can prove, but maybe that's, he wants to leave that up to a jury. But yeah, it was interesting, I think. But to Piers' point, any exposure for F1 in an audience, in front of an audience as big as the Super Bowl, has got to help.
What about you? What do you have your eye on?
Well, I agree. I'm going to be watching the Daytona 500. Interesting, this weekend is also the NBA All-Star Game, but because of the Olympics and the All-Star festivities and the game are out in LA, what I'm hearing from a lot of my friends who are going to be out there on behalf of teams and brands and so forth is that the schedule's really changed. So like things are much earlier in the day than they typically would be. So like you're rethinking your meeting schedule, whether you're taking clients out to dinner, things like this. Add into the fact that Sunday is also Valentine's Day. So if you're hosting a customer or a sponsor with their spouse or significant other, do you really want to invite them to something on Sunday? And like, oh, look at that cute couple in the third wheel.
Speaking of All-Star Weekend, the game is being played at Intuit Dome, which will be interesting to follow that story that we've talked about quite a bit with the Clippers and Steve Ballmer, because I have to think the press is going to be all over that situation. And we should give a shout out to past guest 𝘋𝘳𝗪𝗓, because this is, her baby this whole weekend.
This is her, no pun intended, this is her Super Bowl. This is her Daytona 500.
Yeah, it is. And she puts an amazing amount of work, but if there's anyone up for the level of work that this requires, it's 𝘋𝘳𝗪𝗓, because she's never backed down from a challenge and she always ends up delivering. So good luck to her and the entire team out there.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is that I'm looking at right now, the United States stands kind of square in the middle of the roster of nations in terms of medals won. They've won 2, one in skiing with Breezy, which is an awesome skier's name.
Like Blades Brown level.
Yeah, it's not quite peekaboo, but it's right up there. Lindsey Vonn crashed out. Mm. They say that the leg fracture was not related to the torn ACL, but I find that hard to believe because she's not skiing at 100%. But unfortunate ending to her Olympic dream, at least for this time. She'll be 45 next time. I don't count her out, quite frankly.
If there's anyone not to count out, it's Lindsey Vonn.
But if the United States doesn't finish near or at the top of the medal count, I just fear it's going to give fodder to people on the right who are going to say, well, they were too woke. They were too worried about bashing the president, so they weren't going to, win. And it's just, there's just so many great winter athletes, particularly from European countries. And it's, Italy is at the top of the medal count. Is that a fix? I'm kidding. But no, they've developed their athletes to peak at this time, which I think is awesome. But there's a lot of opportunity for the United States to win medals. Men's and women's hockey, they're obviously got a very good shot. Figure skating, some of the other sports that are going to be played in the second week, competed in the second week. But we'll see. I just think it may be unfortunate that people will bash the athletes if they don't come out or near the top of the medal count. And you know what? They're great. Every one of them is great for making it to the Olympics. All right. I think that's it. What do you say, partner?
Let's do it. Let's close
Okay.
it.
Well, thank you again to Piers Sanderson, director of 𝘧𝗵𝗶𝘀 and other great documentary films or series. And thank you to our listeners. If you like what you have heard, hit that subscribe button, like, follow, comment. You can find us on dpandmcgee.com. But until next time, he's DP, I'm McGee, and we'll talk soon.